Today I will show you how you can create your first smart contract and some tools that can be useful for that. Some of those tools will be, for example, MetaMask, Remix, Solidity, and others. The idea of this video is to create a basic setup so that you can develop your first smart contract, and I will show you an example. If you want to see more advanced smart contracts, don't miss my other videos about fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens. Okay, so the first thing that we will need to do is to go to Google, then type Remix IDE, and let's look for the first one. Now in this page, scroll down and click here, Remix Online IDE. Now we can close that one. Once we're here, we can see that we have the different buttons here on the left, and also we have some tabs. We can close everything here. The first thing that we will do is to create a new file. And here, this is the file for our smart contract. So let's give it a name. Example1.sol. .sol means that this file is a Solidity file and we are going to code a smart contract here. Paste the license. In this case, I'm using an MIT license, as you can see here. Next, we will use the Pragma Solidity version, which means the Solidity version that we are going to use in this code. There are several Solidity versions, and some of them fix bugs that they found in the past. So usually it is a good idea to take one of the latest versions. So in this case, I'm going to use the version 0.8.10. If it is the first time that you open the Remix IDE, a good idea is to go here and click on auto compile. This will help us so that we don't have to compile everything when do any changes. So now we can start coding. So let's start with contract example1, which is the name of the file, and give some space. Here we can create some, for example, variables that we will use. So let's create one that says count. This one will be a number and the name will be count. And let's make it public and here. So now we created the first variable, and this one, as we can see here, it is count. For this example, my idea is to show you how you can create a counter where you can increase or decrease the counter by clicking some functions. Now that we have the count variable, let's create a function that can modify that variable. So for the function, let's say function add 1. And this function will be public, for example. And inside the function, we can make some changes to the variable. For example, count will be count plus 1. And this is how we modify the variable. Another way that we can do this is just doing it like this, count plus plus. So we don't have to do it like that. Okay, here we are adding 1 to the count. And let's create another function that can subtract from the count. For the other function, we can just copy and paste this one. Let's change the name. Subtract 1. And here, instead of plus plus, let's do minus minus. So now we have a function that can add 1 and another function that can subtract 1. Since the variable is public, we will see how the value changes. The auto-compile was enabled, so that means that we don't have to compile the code. But if we don't enable the option, we have this button here, which says compile example1.sol, which is our file. So we can click here if we want, and that will compile the code. But compiling doesn't mean that it will run. To run it, let's go here. And in order to test the contract code, we have to deploy it. This Remix IDE simulates a local blockchain where we can deploy the smart contract. It will be free and you will see how it works. So we have here all the options. Make sure that we have selected the example1, which is our file. And let's go to deploy. Once we deploy the smart contract, we will see here this tab. And we can click on, for example, count. This will show us the value of count at this moment. The default value for numeric values is 0. So that's why we see 0 here. But if we want to add 1, we can click on the option add 1, which is our function. This will give us a transaction to the local blockchain. So for the transaction, we have a transaction hash. The hash is the identification of the of the transaction that we created. It says from. In this Remix ID, it is using the default account, which is this one. And also it specifies that the function that was called is this one, add1. It also gives us other information, that, for example, the gas, the transaction cost, the execution cost, and the inputs that were used. Well, let's go now and see the current value of count. As we can see here, count is now 1. So 1, 2, 3. So we click it 3 more times and it was 1, so it should be 4 now. As we can see here, it is 4. And to decrease it, we can use the other function, subtract 1, which will give us the number 3. And if we click it 1, 2, it will give us the number 1. As we can see, the function is working. For each time that we click on those functions, we see that a new transaction was created. Each of those transactions on a real blockchain will cost you gas, because we are changing something inside the contract. Every time that you change something, you have to pay for the gas cost. If you just read from the contract, read functions are free, but for the write functions, you have to pay for the gas. In this case, the local blockchain is connected and we don't have to use real tokens to pay for it. So this is a basic example how you can create your first smart contract, a counter, and I hope that it helps. Now I want to show you how you can deploy this code to a testnet so that everyone in the world can see it if you send them your smart contract address. The smart contract address is this one that we have here. We can copy it and paste it here. This is the smart contract address, but as I told you in the beginning, this is using a local blockchain, which is only in your computer. So you cannot share this address with anyone. In order to deploy to a testnet, you need to be connected to the testnet. One way to do it is by using a wallet like MetaMask. In order to create a MetaMask wallet, you have to go to the MetaMask website and please follow all the instructions that they have there. Once you create your MetaMask wallet, you will have an account. You will have to use a faucet to fund that account with the tokens that will be used to pay for the network fees. I already have some tokens here for the Matic network on testnet, and this is my account. So as we can see here, we have 9 Matic tokens, and I will use those tokens to deploy to the testnet. So now that we have the MetaMask extension connected and everything is good, we can change here on the environment and select the injected provider by MetaMask. Here it says that it's using a custom network, and now it means that it is connected. To deploy the contract, we just have to click here where it says deploy. It will give us a pop-up from MetaMask just to confirm the transaction. I will confirm it, and the transaction is pending. This is taking some time because the testnets simulate the real blockchain. You have to send a transaction, the transaction is processed, and then you get the result from that transaction. We see that it took some seconds and now we have the result. This is the information about the transaction, but the important part here is that we have the contract deployed on the left. This contract is deployed and we can see the address of the contract. Now this address is public. You can share it with other people and that people can use the smart contract. Let's do the same thing. Let's click on add one just to modify the count. But this time when you click on add one, since it is right into the smart contract, doing some changes on the blockchain, it will ask you to sign a transaction and pay for the gas fees. Click on confirm. And that transaction also has to be processed by the blockchain. The transaction will pay the gas fees and then we will get the result of the transaction. So this is the result. We get a transaction hash, which is the identifier. But the most important thing here is that now the count is 1 because we did a change. As we can see here, now the value changed and that means that the transaction was processed correctly. But if we want to click on the other function and let's go back to 0, we can click on subtract, but subtract is also a function that writes to the blockchain. So you have to confirm again, and that confirmation will make you pay for the gas fees of the transaction. So now we have the result here. Again, another transaction hash for the second transaction that we sent. And if we click on count, we can see that the count is 0 because we decreased the number by 1. With that, I show you how you can modify the values of the smart contract, how you can deploy on a testnet. But let me show you how this looks on the Transaction Explorer. We can click on the on the address of the contract, and let's go to Mumbai Transaction Explorer. Click on the first option and we can see here that it says Polygon Scan Mumbai. Here we can paste the address of the smart contract that we deployed, and if we see here all the transactions that occur on the blockchain, it says that this is the first transaction, and 3 minutes ago there was a contract creation. So we created the contract 3 minutes ago. Now we have the other function, which is add one, and it happened 2 minutes ago. Here we have who called the function, who wanted to process the transaction. So this is our address. If we can see here, it starts with 3EF. And if we go to MetaMask, we should see the same 3EF. That means that it was our MetaMask wallet, the one that sent this transaction. Then we can see the other functions, the add one function to add one to the counter. The other function is the ones to subtract from the counter. Let's click on add one, and here we have some information about it. For example, the transaction hash, which is the same transaction hash as we saw in the MetaMask extension. It should be the same one here. We can see here it ends with F8B, and we have the same here, F8B. That is the transaction to add one. If we go back, we can click on the transaction to subtract, and we see the transaction hash says 263, and here we have the same transaction hash, 263. That is the same. We can see here in this example, everything that you do on a real blockchain or on a testnet will be recorded to the blockchain, and everyone can see it. You can pass this address to anyone and they will be able to see all this information. Also, if you have the transaction hash, let me just copy this one. Let's say that you only have the transaction hash of a transaction that you send and you want to see information about it. You can go here, paste the transaction hash, and it will give you more information about it. For example, when it happened, who sent it, to which address was the interaction, and other information. And that is how you can deploy your first smart contract on a testnet, and then to share it, you just have to send the address of the contract and that people will be able to use it.